Welcome back to part 3 of NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and we've got Steve Hastie and Neil Mitchell as well. Lads, when we finished part 2, we were just talking about your lineups, and Manquillo obviously got a mention by the both of you, and both of you seem to have taken to him. I've got to be honest, I have as well, and talk today of him having a long-term contract extension as opposed to a short-term one. So that's probably good news then.
I think it's great news. Absolutely. Go on, Neil.
Yeah, honest football. We're like honest footballers.
Yeah.
What do we demand? People that give a shit. That's all we demand. And he's honest and he's straightforward and he has that kind of, you know, you've spoke to Warren Barton. I've spoke to Warren Barton on some of the stuff I've done out here in the UAE when I had a radio show here. Warren didn't get off to a great start, but he showed he had heart and he had he give him monkeys.
Yeah.
Manquillo's the same. Look how he's embedded himself in the region. He's got his brother over here playing non-league as well, you know.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff matters. If you care, if you absolutely care, if you give as much of a monkeys about that shirt on your back as we would if it was on our back, we'll thank you for it. And we'll applaud you for it. And that's the kind of player he is. He seems pretty damn honest to me. And that's why I like him. But also, I think he's underrated. I think if you look at some of the positions he gets himself into, I think he's positionally a very good fullback.
Yeah, great, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think he's grown on the fan base over the last couple of seasons. You know, I think that at first there was always that, you know, oh yes, you know what, he's an ex-Mackham and all that type of thing, and you know, all that sort of baggage that comes with it. But you know what, like a lot of players who play for Sunderland who've come to Newcastle, you know, you look back over the years, the Barry Venisons of this world, for example, you know, they come in and they wear the shirt with pride, and they put probably 110% in because they're carrying that little bit of baggage that gets thrown at them now and again. And I think he's a solid defender. I think he's wholehearted, and I think that, you know, he's not the sort of lad who would let you down. You know, I'd rather in a room with him when the fight breaks out than not be, if you know what I mean, because he looks an honest, genuine lad who would back you up, you know. And I think his teammates probably admire that in him too, because he's, you know, he just looks like a genuine person.
NUFC Iceman says, due to the terrible training facilities, could that be the reason we have so many bad injuries? And do you think it should be first on the list to get sorted, Neil?
But if I remember right, didn't Souness try and blame the training ground on injuries when he was manager?
Yeah.
It's a difficult one. To be fair, we actually have a far better medical team than people realise.
Yeah.
Paul Catterson, the club doctor, is pretty, you know, well respected in football terms, and the stuff he's done with COVID. Premier League have been in touch with Paul Catterson about COVID restart, probably as much as any other club doctor in the Premier League, which is significant.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've got a better medical team than I think they're given credit for. But is the training ground to blame for injury? No, I think it's player management. I genuinely don't think we manage players very well sometimes. Look at Lejeune. Lejeune would come back from his second cruciate ligament. The guy must be like a bloody machine. When you look at how quickly he's come back from 2 bad cruciate ligament injuries. Chris, I had a medial ligament injury and I still limp when it's cold. You know, that lad has come back in ridiculous times from cruciate injuries.
Yeah.
Yet when it was obvious in that little run of games after he scored the 2 goals against Everton, there was a point where he was knackered and he needed to be taken out of the team, and they didn't. And they did it when it was too late. That's the feeling for me. It's player management. It's understanding recovery. It's understanding how, and you don't have to have good facilities for that.
No.
You know, how, for example, and you know this, funny enough, you're sitting wearing your Dunstan top there.
Yeah.
You know, when Dunstan got the FA Vars, they were in that stupid position where they had to play ridiculous. Was it something like 12 games in 3 weeks or something like that?
Yeah.
They weren't dropping like flies.
Yeah.
You know, it's player management. It's managing the person. That's what it's about for me. It's not necessarily about the facilities. I don't know what Steve thinks.
I agree entirely, absolutely entirely. And I think that, you know, the pitches are no different at the training ground than they were during Rafa's day. No different whatsoever. In fact, they're probably better, you know, because there's work done on those pitches constantly. We've got some of the best training pitches around. Okay, the facilities inside the training ground might be slightly archaic compared to the clubs around the Premier League, but the pitches are exactly the same. The pitches are absolutely first class. And Rafa made sure of that when he was there. And I think, you know what, if there was a criticism that I had to make, the difference between the continental style manager and the British style manager, the old school as we would call them, you know, the Jim Smiths of this world, and I suppose to that extent Steve Bruce's world, I very rarely would expect to hear from a continental manager, he's 90%, but he's got to run it off. We're going to see how he goes. I think, you know, when it comes to in Europe, you don't get that. You're injured, you're injured. It's as simple as that, you know, and you come back when you're 100%. You don't run off injuries, you know. We're not back in the day of you know, sort of rubbing the thigh with a cold brown ale bottle to get the bruises out of it before you turn up the next game, you know, which is what the old, you know, it used to be like in the 70s and 80s, you know, that sort of facility. They no longer even come on with a bucket of water, do they? And a sponge. You know, they come on with more medical kit than you would expect to see in an earthquake, you know, for God's sake, you know. It's
some would say ours come on with a bucket of glitter. Anyway, you're right though. You remember sometimes Rafa would make a team change, and everybody would go, "What the hell has he done that for?" Well, maybe the lad had a tweak. Maybe he turned up. He turned something in training, or he pulled up a little bit, and Rafa just went, "Nah, you're not playing."
Yeah,
I'm trust my squad. I'm going to put somebody else in.
You know what it is?
Because you would. Sometimes you would do something and you'd think, what the hell's he made that change for? And people would be like, eh. Well, maybe we're saying that. Why? Because you're absolutely right. The UK old school style is all running off, you play through it. This, that, the other. And sometimes when they play through it, they're then out for 6 weeks afterwards because they've done something wrong. Whereas Rafa wouldn't allow that to happen, and his team had everybody monitored. And comes back to the thing that you were saying about when you were with him with my dad, and he was doing the thing with the bloody chips and explaining where people should have been on the pitch, and he had tatey all over his fingers, you know. That whole thing, that comes down to understanding your players and understanding your squad and about what you're going to do and how they're performing, and they're not machines.
Yeah.
I get it that, you know, if you look at, like, for example, the great Leeds team in the 70s, they managed to do a double with, I think, 14 players, 15 players, but it's not the same era.
No.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
It's totally different. And these guys, it's sometimes the difference between a Shire horse pulling a plough and a thoroughbred racehorse, and you don't handle the two things the same. And you're absolutely right, Steve. You know, this whole concept is 90% to run it off. It's not going to happen now. Or it shouldn't happen now. And if they are still doing that,
yeah, you've been, Neil. You've been to FIFA science and medical shows and events where you've talked about it. And you've listened to it, and you've come back and told us about it. You know, and how sports medicine and sports science and the link between the two. I mean, and this is something that you've talked about for 3 or 4 years at least that I can recall.
Well, look, I spoke at a FIFA conference here in Dubai in 2018, and I'm sitting listening to the Barcelona head of medicine talking about a partnership they had with NASA, and they were talking about putting players into space, into low Earth orbit for 2 days, because it increases the muscle healing over on small minor muscle injuries. You know, and you're like, hang on a minute, what? You know, it was just out there, absolutely out there. I remember having dinner with Barcelona's doctor, Michel de Hugo was on the same table. And the guy's going, wait till you hear my speech tomorrow. I'll blow you away with my lecture tomorrow. And I can tell you, I'm looking around this lecture theatre and everybody was like, because it's just, if you look at the top clubs, and I was speaking to a guy who has this machine that measures muscle recovery. And apparently Pep Guardiola loves it. He had it at Barca, he had it at Munich, and I presume he's got it at Man City now. And effectively, it stimulates the muscle, it looks at the recovery, and it tells you whether it's healed or not properly. There's basically a graph that this machine produces. And that it'll pick up a muscle injury that a physio might say, no, he's fine, he's good to play. And this machine will say, no, he's not. It's
Brilliant.
that different. It's that. If you talk to the sports scientists in the sports medicine guys, and I've funny enough, I've just had an email this week. I've been asked to speak at the next EcoSep conference, which is going on in Athens in November 2021. So I'm going to try and have something put together for them, which thankfully it's enough time to do. And if you talk to the top guys in FIFA and sports medicine, the difference that they're looking for is less than 1%.
I hope it's better than goal line technology at Aston Villa.
Oh, honestly, seriously. I think we're going to get a message in 11 weeks' time saying, yeah, to go. I mean, honest, but the differences you're looking for are fractions of a percent.
Yeah.
The difference between Lionel Messi and an also-ran is less than 1% at the top flight.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at all the metrics that they use to measure players now, well, and if you look at injuries in particular, if they've got like machines that can measure muscle recovery, and they measure the muscle recovery far better than a physio can judge it by experience. Mm-hmm. That's the difference you're looking for, and so I think that's something as new owners coming in really need to sit down and look at, because we're obviously not using shit like that, and we should be. We should be on. If they want a functional team that wants to challenge at every level of the game in Europe, we need people like that in saying, give me the technology, give it to our doctors, and let's blow everybody away. Because honestly, this is why Guardiola fell out with Bayern Munich, because he sacked that doctor, the bloke that was injecting bull's blood into people and all sorts of weird shit like that. He got rid of him within about 6 months. And that upset the Bayern hierarchy, because he was well in with the Bayern hierarchy. But I'm sorry, that guy just sells snake oil and woo. He's not a clinician, if you ask me, with my professional head on.
I've got a great...
Sorry, I'm ranting again, sorry.
I've got a great question here for you. Neil. It made me laugh when I read it. Paul Oxley, definitely. He says, if Mitch could extract teeth from 3 people he didn't like without pain relief, who would they be and why? His 3, number 1 would be Richard Keys, number 2 would be Mike Ashley, and number 3 would be Miguel Delaney.
Oh man, I'm far more professional than that, man. Seriously. Yeah. Oh man, far more professional.
Steve, have you got an answer?
I mean, obviously poor Miguel's going to be. He's next been on the line for weeks now, hasn't it? So he's going to be at the top of everybody's list, you know. And I don't think that people are going to want a dentist to take his teeth out, are they? I think there's something else going to be used to take his teeth out.
Mad Frankie Fraser.
Yeah.
Do you know, man?
Tell you what, you go back to the technology. And if anything, the one thing I was amazed with was that the head of the Professional Referees Association, or whatever they're called, PGMOL, I'm amazed he didn't try and blame Michael Oliver for not changing the batteries in his watch and not getting the email to tell him to do it, because it was getting to that farcical situation where he didn't get the signal in his watch. You know, and I'm amazed I haven't hung Michael Oliver out to dry, to be perfectly honest.
I haven't spoke to Mark Halsey about this, because obviously we used to get Mark Halsey on our radio show here in the UAE. But I know what Mark would say about that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you've just said, mate. Honestly, that's exactly what you've just said.
Well, I think I would certainly extract Miguel's teeth, for his blatant, blatant wind up of Newcastle fans. I've got to be honest. There's a few other journalists who could probably join the list over the last 11 weeks who've done nothing but be negative and have a pop. But Miguel's definitely number one journalist. I think NG account, who is on Twitter, would need to be in the top 3 because he's just added fuel to the fire. Certainly with various stuff that he's put out over the last week, which is just winding people up and for no reason at all. And Mike Ashley's always got to be in your top 3, hasn't he? Because of what he's done and all the suffering that he's made people go through over the last 13 years. It's been mental. So that's whose teeth I would extract. We've got to go through these questions because there's quite a few people sent stuff. Stephen Chowie, he says, Mitch mentioned a couple of weeks ago we have heard that the final obstacle, had been overcome regarding the takeover. Was this obstacle the Premier League getting the draft version of the WTO report, which we have now found out they had a copy of this weeks ago? So a lot of people seem to think, the WTO report is what they were waiting for. Is that true, do you think?
We talked about it last week, and there's absolutely no doubt that they weren't going to act on the draft report.
Yeah.
It was only going to be on the final report because that genuinely, a draft report is a draft. There could be something comes up in the last week that changes it. So I think they were only ever going to wait for that. And I think I've heard people say that they were using that as an excuse to fail it. I actually think they're waiting for it as an excuse to pass it. Yeah. It works both ways. That's a sword that can cut both ways. Like I said to you earlier, and probably in the first part that we did, I now understand. I have a bit more clarity on why Saudi went big on June the 1st as the date. I still want a bit more clarification on that, but I genuinely believe I have a good idea why that was the case. I also know, and Steve would agree with this because I've shared the WhatsApp conversation with Steve, that we know that PIF have been working on a deal regarding rights from a very, very good source in Saudi, who has absolutely no reason to bullshit.
Yeah,
it's somebody that I trust implicitly. He has a vested interest in Newcastle United as well, so I can't see him wanting to go on something on hydro just for shits and giggles, because he could quite easily do that himself on Twitter if he wanted to, and he doesn't. So I know it's something that's the whole piracy regional rights thing has been a sticking point and something that needs to be worked out. Has there been a breakthrough? Yes, I hope so. Certainly based on information that I've received and shared with Steve, yeah, it's something that's been discussed significantly. And it's at the end of the day, there's so much red tape in this because of contracts. I actually, in some ways, feel for the Premier League because they're having a tummy rub a broadcast provider who, in the last week, has now just gone to chuck their toys out the cot, and they've gone to open blackmail, basically, by one of their CEOs saying that they're not going to bid again, blah 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 blah. That's rubbish. That's not a good look for them. But it raises questions about why would they feel that they have to say that, and that's because I believe there's a deal on the table. End of.
Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole manner that's changed over the last week, and if I'm perfectly honest, I think when the Saudis presented their paper to the WTO, and then I think when the team at PIF got their hands on that at the time and looked at it and thought, you know what, there is nothing in here that jeopardises our chances of taking over Newcastle United, and legally we're in an excellent position. The argument that the Saudis are putting forward, that the Saudi authorities are putting forward, that were accepted, by the way, by the WTO in terms of security, etc. And the rest of it was all to do with commercial, and it was up to the Premier League to make that decision on. And as Neil says, the deals to be done. And I think that the confidence levels, once they knew that obviously the Saudi, as a country, KSA knew that there was a case going forward at the WTO. They knew how to answer that case. They knew how to answer their position. And this is the takeover has basically been a sideshow for it. That's been caught up in it. And now we've got the answers from the WTO, and there's nothing in it that should really impact on the takeover being announced, other than the fact that now BN and the rest of the setup over there are looking for something for themselves that benefits them. And I think you're in the face saving. It's something that Neil would probably appreciate more than anyone living and working in the Middle East. That face saving is a big thing, and that nobody ever loses in a deal. Everybody wins in a deal, because if you walk away from the deal thinking you've won, you've won. And when both parties walk away thinking they've won, everybody's won. And I think that's where we're at now.
Yeah, I agree.
No, absolutely, that is where we're at. If you look at it, even if you look at the responses to the WTO report, which I said earlier, there's a Qatari one, there's a very pro-Saudi one that was published in the Gulf News out here recently. If you read both those reports, you think they're talking about a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is somewhere in the middle. What the Premier League are doing, and to be fair to Richard Masters, he might walk away from this like a hero, because he's created a win-win-win situation.
No, he's done it the right way. Look at it. This is the thing. The Premier League are under massive pressure with this whole takeover.
Hugely.
Because of who it is, because of the pandemic, because they're judged on these things now. Well, they've had Vincent Tan, for God's sake, come in. They had various other people who've come to Premier League clubs who really people are going, really? Is he really fit to be a proper person? Mm-hmm. And the Mike Ashley situation, they won't admit it, but Mike Ashley hasn't really proved, although he's run it like a business and done it, it hasn't been good for football. So I think essentially they just want to make sure they get this right. Look, we're backing on with time, so let's move on to the next question. Kev Fitz says, Steve, we have a surplus of centre-backs. Personally, I think that Fabian Shaw will get into Man City or Arsenal's team. City are crying out for a ball-playing centre-back. If you had to sacrifice one and sell him, who would it be, Steve Hastie?
You know what? If I had to sacrifice one, I think, like I said before, it depends on what my choice was in terms of my formation. And I think if Shaw does have a weakness, it's that, as Rafa always said, he can't play in a back four. He can't be two. He can't be part of a two. He has to be part of a three. And that would probably be swaying it. But at the same time, you've got Fernandes, who's getting older. There's another year, another year older, another year potentially slower. And I think if you've got a good coach, you can turn Shaw into a two formation and operate very, very well with a decent guy alongside him, hopefully Lascelles. God, how do I choose? Fernandes, get rid of him. There you go.
Same question to you, Neil.
Well, Steve makes a very good point. I actually think for a club that has a reputation for enjoying attacking football, we now have a surfeit of centre-backs. We've got 6 players we could put in a centre-back and we'd be comfortable with it. You've got Lascelles, you've got Lejeune, you've got Shea, you've got Fernandes, you've got Clark, and you've got Dummett. We've never had that luxury.
No.
Ever. You know, imagine that 6 permed into Keegan's team.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you have had that level of confidence? Absolutely. Of them, you've got Fernandez, as Steve says, age. For me, you've got Lejeune, bless him, injury risk, injury history. And then you've got Shea, this perceived inability to play in a 4, and like Steve rightly says, that could be coached into him. We played with a forward, Albert, who, frankly, was the most random centre-back ever.
Steve Harvey said he never played in a 4 ever. He played in a 1.
No.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, so I think we could live with that. And a good coach could get that into him. If he was prepared to sit down and listen to Rafa, I'm sure if Rafa came back, he would go into a 4.
Yeah.
That was why Rafa was happy to let Mbemba go, because Mbemba didn't listen. As good as he is and as good as he was. He
refused to learn English as well, which wasn't great.
Absolutely. You know, end of, you know. So, so if you're going to sacrifice one purely on age, bless him, Fernandez, yes.
I would get rid of Lascelles. I'm not being a Lascelles fan. I would keep the rest of them and get rid of him. I'm not a Lascelles fan, and I know that's controversial, and I know he's the captain. But I think, especially if we're getting new owners in, I don't think you want to be building your team around Lascelles. I think there's better centre halves out there. I would make that a priority. I know a lot of people have said that make the goalkeeper a priority, which, you know, Dubravka is a good keeper.
What?
It surprises me. Yeah. A lot of people have said that the goalkeeper a priority.
Give over.
Mad.
Hey.
Mad, yeah. I would buy a new centre half. I would say we need to build it on a cornerstone of the team. We need a leader. We need somebody like, you know, Man City had, obviously, you know, a good strong centre half. Man United have had it over the years, good strong centre halves, whether it was Jaap Stam or Steve Bruce. God, you know, he was a great centre half. Tony Adams at Man United, you know, all the great teams, Vincent Kompany at Man City, all built around a leader, a good strong centre half. And I think Newcastle are still lacking that. They haven't got it. They haven't got that person at the back, and I think that's what they need to look for. Next question. NUFC Spain says, "What does the new financial fair play ruling actually mean?" A lot of people are getting excited about it, but the way I've read it, it won't mean unlimited spending for 12 months, just averaged out over the next 2 years. Is that right?
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah, I think even then, I think they've extended it to like 30 million euros or something, but 25 million of those euros have got to be sort of backed up and supported by the owners. So even then, it's basically a way of getting around this COVID situation where it's very, very easy for a club to tick over into the financial fair play problem area, and it's purely an accounting thing, really. And it's to get over that rule. So what they've done is they've said we're providing a little bit of slack, a little bit of leeway, but the amount of money that they're talking about is literally to ensure that the clubs can carry on and support themselves, and they're having to do it with a guarantee of if they are going down that route and they are going to be in debt of up to 30 million, that there's got to be at least 25 million is going to have to be underwritten by the owners. So that it sounds good, but and it's going to help clubs. But whether or not it's the panacea that people are thinking to allow Newcastle United to suddenly go out and spend millions and millions of pounds more, it's not.
Yeah, no. Anthony Clennell saying since the publication of the WTO report or the non-stop threats, publications, announcements and media reports from BN and their sources since the releases of this report, a sign that they were suddenly in a state of panic. We've also had a question as well from Sam saying, what do you lads make of the BN blackmail we saw this week? Last dummy being thrown out of the pram. It's what we were discussing earlier on, lads. But a lot of people wisen up to the fact that BN Sports are actually, it's been part and parcel of the whole geopolitics that we've been witnessing over the last few weeks.
And exactly. That's why I said this early on and tried to, like, look, I'm not an expert in geopolitics. I don't pretend to be. But I live in the region, and I know, I can tell you when I read a report who's written it. And I can tell you when a story breaks how each individual outlet will report it. It's predictable, absolutely predictable. It's symptomatic of schism in politics and far more than you actually ever believe in this region.
Yeah.
Is it solvable? Will Newcastle United solve it? Nah. And I tell you what, when the takeover goes through, because I'm going to be positive, which I know gets up people's nose, but I don't care. Let's be positive. When it goes through, it won't get easier. It'll just change.
Yeah.
And it will change. And it'll still be there. And we'll still be playing the game. And I would ask every fan on social media to just stop and think before you respond in anger, before you respond with something that is well intended, but could be misconstrued, because the game will change. And it'll always be there until things are sorted out in this region. And will things be sorted out in this region? Not for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting. I think we're reaching an end game. I think that's the one thing we've got out of the three-parter tonight, lads. I think we're definitely reaching an end game, and I can't see it lasting much longer. I think it's significant. I think Amanda's out of court today, and that's the last time she'll be there, although our mind will be still focused on that case until it comes to its conclusion, of course. But we won't actually have to go through the physical attendance of court and being there. So it's I think we're reaching an end game. I would be very surprised if we don't see something happen now over the next couple of weeks. I think most journalists are now saying that as well. I think most journalists are starting to come to that conclusion.
They're now saying days, aren't they? Yeah, they're now saying days. Some of them are now saying days.
Some people are saying days, but yeah, again, I just reiterate, no, none of us know, but I think it's a safe conclusion now to say that that's what's going to happen. Look, last 5 minutes, lads. Let's look ahead to the first game back tomorrow, 2:00 at St James's Park. Newcastle United take on Sheffield United. Of course, got that great win down at Bramall Lane earlier in the season. Steve, how do you see the game going tomorrow?
Having watched the first two games on TV, and the first game was dire, wasn't it? It was shocking. I was very disappointed in Sheffield United, to be perfectly honest, because I didn't think they even came out until that sort of dodgy goal that wasn't. They never really came out. I thought the game was pedestrian. And if that's a sign of what the first two games are, your first game is going to be like, I'm thinking to myself, we've really got to. If we've learned anything from watching that game, then Bruce has really got to get his team sort of really set up properly and from the start. You look at Man City. Well, Man City, Arsenal just weren't at the races, were they? And you look at the way that the performance of David Luiz and the injuries that they had, and everything seemed to go wrong for them. Like I say, we've got to get out there. We've got to show positivity from the start. We've got to show Sheffield United that we mean business, because we've got a marker to lay down. I think in the first game, we talked about it the last couple of times about the advantage or disadvantage of playing at home, or the advantages being nullified. Is that going to happen? It could, but like I say, I wasn't impressed with Sheffield United at all on their Wednesday night. Our problem is, can we score goals? Can we score goals? That's the big thing. I listened to Malcolm last night on the show that you did with him, and he's quite right. We just haven't got goals in us. And if there's any concern, it's that. Are we looking at 0-0? I hope not. I hope we can scrape through with a 1-0 win. I'll be delighted with a 1-0 win, because I'll be delighted simply with 3 points, Steve.
Yeah. Okay, Neil, what's your prediction?
Take the points, definitely. I would like to see our players come out like greyhounds out of slips, because I haven't seen a team come out like that. Not Man City, not Arsenal, not Sheffield United, not Aston Villa. that first game was dire. I watched it all, even with that goal line thing. It was rubbish.
Yeah.
Rubbish game. I would like to see. I would love to think that Bruce can put into our players a bit of passion and say, right, so if you're taking, go get it. Because if we come out fully charged, Sheffield United showed me nothing. Even after they got upset after that VAR decision, they still didn't have for me, the passion to bring it on. Because if they had the passion, I think they would have won that game. Villa were rubbish.
Yeah, it can't be run like a training game, can it?
No,
it can't. We cannot play like it's a training game. It's got to be full on, 100%.
It has to be, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think if he's got them revved up, we will win that game.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't made a prediction yet, but I'm going to tonight. As Steve says, I think there's the big issue is that goals in this team is always going to be an issue. I take great optimism in the fact that Maximum is fit and he is ruining his garden with his dog, which came out in the conference today. He's been putting in extra sessions with his dog, running around his dog, and I think he's going to run rigs round United, who Malcolm McDonald, of course, on the show earlier this week had said he felt that they would have an advantage that they'd played. I think they're going to have a disadvantage. And
they are.
I think the heads are going to be down after that controversial decision where they had the perfectly legitimate goal ignored. So I think Newcastle will win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win. And we'll get 2 goals. And I think Almiron will continue in his good rich vein of form, and some Maximum will as well. So 2-1 to Newcastle is what I'm going for.
It's a sword that cuts both ways again, mate. It can work for Sheffield United, it can work against them, and I think it will work against them. The other thing as well, lack crowd. I genuinely believe Joe Linton, without the crowd there, without that perceived pressure, we might see the real individual that is in there. Let's see. I hope.
I'll tell you what, Neil, if he cannot play and there's no crowd, and he cannot play when there is a crowd, then we've got a big problem.
We're a huge problem, mate. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'd like to get you on tomorrow afternoon, lads, after the game, if you're up for it. I'd like to do that throughout the season. Is that
Yeah, sure, absolutely, no problem, Steve.
Just to do a recap on the game, just do 20 minutes on the game, have a talk about the incidents, etc. So it's a 2:00 kick-off in England. I'll try and get you on after the game, and we'll just do a quick 20-minute recap of the game, lads.
Smash it. Great stuff.
Good stuff. Thanks for joining us, and I'll catch you tomorrow.
Right. Cheers,
See you
guys.
later, man.
Enjoy the weekend.